Do we need to officially know who's here?
I mean, you can look, and someone who's taken meeting minutes can take note.
I see everyone's here.
Works for me.
All right, so you should have the copy of the budget in front of you. Hopefully you have all reviewed and prepared for any questions that you may have. What I'd like to do tonight is go through page by page and see where we're at 9 o'clock. Is that all right with everybody?
Sure.
Hopefully we'll be in a good place.
Who is going to be the designated minute keeper for?
I hear it's me.
Okay. Cool.
All right, we'll get started. So you have it in front of you. We'll look at page 1.
Can I start out here?
Yes, sir.
So first and foremost, I want to talk you through just kind of how this budget was prepared. So we've had a lot of noise and different numbers. Sorry. We've had a lot of noise and different numbers and comparative numbers, kind of tough. So I went in and basically just went to our finance system, or I'm sorry, our payroll system, and I downloaded at the employee level what we paid employees last year. And that was where I started this budget. So I made 2 assumptions. I assumed the employees were going to make exactly work exactly the number of hours they did last year. Overtime was actually quite low last year. So I think that's a reasonable assumption to start with. And I took the wage that they make today, and since most of them are unionized and they are going to receive a 4% raise by contract, I applied a 4% raise across the board. So there might be some wiggle room there, yes, downward. With that, I then pushed that through, calculated benefits as they calculate today. I did not take into account the fact that August 1, our insurance will renew. If there's an increase then, it's not built into this budget. So there's a lot of soft assumptions that are made, but the personnel cost is 80-some% of this budget. That 80-some% is pretty much fixed based on the hours that those employees worked in 2019. So that's where I started. Then I took the deck of activity from 2019, which was a 1.5-inch activity level of actuals, and went through any kind of account on here that had any sort of a balance in it last year, and looked at the items, and if they were large enough, decided whether they were repetitive items, and built those into this year's budget. Pretty time consuming and pretty ugly, but I didn't know how else to do it based on my lack of history with this city. So basically that means this budget is a repetitive budget. We did it in 19, we're going to do it again in 20 from an expense standpoint. Questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cropper. All right, folks, page 1.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
I guess just so that we're all on the same page in a sense, recognizing that the beginning of this is, as noted, a snapshot. Some of the questions associated maybe to this initial page would also be discussed later. So I just, in case if it starts to sound like we're asking the same questions and maybe we need more detail at a different time.
Noted.
Mr. Chair, maybe we actually, I don't think that in years past we haven't really started with a snapshot or the activity level. Maybe we just skip ahead to the actual budget right after revenue sources, because then it will get repetitive. So starting with the general fund at 101.101, unless somebody has a problem with that.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
I would have just maybe like an overview type question that obviously could come up later, but I guess one thing that I see in here, this one-time adjustment on the snapshot, it seems like we've made that adjustment a couple of times, and I'm trying to understand why it still exists. Mr. Cropper, would you be able to address that?
I have addressed that to council, and that adjustment is going to happen. But right now, that adjustment is in the Auditor of State's hands, and I'm waiting for them to, for LGS to complete their assignment that they are doing on behalf of the Auditor of State. They have reached out to me on a fairly regular basis. They are looking at the last few months of 18. This happened in 16, but they're looking for some reason at the last few months of 18 to determine if that is actually what, they've already agreed with me, yes, it exists, but I'm not removing it till they say so. So, but I need to show it continuously and beat you to death with it, sorry.
If it's still there, we just need to talk about it, and that's fine with
It's a
me.
planned one-time adjustment. Is
Yeah.
essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yep. Sorry.
No, we're good.
Okay, anything else on the snapshot?
The budget that you're looking at here, I mean, the reason that we are struggling with a lot of things is not about expenses realistically, it's about the revenues. And the revenues are slightly under 2019 that we projected, and we've talked to this a little bit too. I have identified through Rita the $84,000 in taxes that they collected at the end of the year from the subpoenas that they sent out, and I've got detail of that. So there's again, magic $84,000 one time, sorry, but that's in our 19 numbers. I'm not certain how much of that will repeat. There are currently $370,000 worth of uncollected tax liability, penalty, and interest that came out of that subpoena activity. It may be collectible.
Could you tell
it
me
may
that
not.
number again, please? You say 370?
370,000
Thank you.
change. So I don't know how much of that will be collectible. I have planned a repetitive of like 30 to 40,000 a year, not 80. I see that there are a large amount of civil. I'm not certain it's not a levy that's filed against the property. I forget what kind of that Rita is filing in Hamilton County courts. So there's 100 cases out there against some of these people. Some of them have judgment liens against them of several $1,000s. It's a piece of this 370,000. I don't have a clue how fast that collection activity happens. I know they're going to be garnishing wages as part of this. They've tried to identify how many of these people still exist. It's fairly detailed.
Mr. President.
Yeah, might as well.
Mr. Hedger.
Thank you. I was thinking about not doing it, but
Mr. Cropper.
figured it better.
Mr. Cropper.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Do you know if any of those are reaching the statute of limitations on collection for municipal income taxes?
I do not. I know that the years that were looked at by Rita were 16, 17, and 18. So now there's some of 19 is caught up in this also.
All right.
But I don't think anything older than 16 is in this.
Filed, you the statute of limitations.
So, and some of the collections that they brought in have been older years just because the person that they came up with filed, 5 years of older returns at the same time.
Mr. President.
Ms. Zorb?
So, Mr. Cropper, do you know if Rita has the authority to negotiate that 370 down? Like, when they're at court with Joe Schmo and Joe Schmo owes us $2,000, does Rita have the authority to negotiate that down to $1,000?
They do not. The,
So if it's $2,000, it's $2,000.
$2,000 is $2,000. The authority on penalty and interest, if it comes in through us, we have authority to, and we typically will take tax and run. But at this point, Rita does not have that authority.
Okay. So that 370 should be a true-ish 370.
Correct. But now, some of the records that they came up with to do this is, they've got Ohio tax returns that were filed by these individuals. These individuals may not even live in Ohio anymore. So collections of that is going to be, it'll work its way. I don't know. There's, like I said, there's probably 70 or 80 cases I saw civil court where judgments have been set up. I don't know whether they're collectible or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next 3 pages then are activity level, beginning balances, and a revised budget of 2020. Are there any questions on that?
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'm just trying to figure out like where you are right now.
So that was a snapshot. We're on
Y'all one of
says
three,
one of
right?
3 at the bottom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, if I'm not being clear, please stop me.
We're right here. Right?
Oh, I thought we went past.
Yeah, we're right there. At least that's where he is, so I guess that's where we are. The
So-
activity level.
We had the quick discussion on the snapshot. There's 3 pages of the activity level. Are there any questions on that?
Okay.
And then you get into very good detail level.
Correct.
Mr. President,
Ms. Nichols?
just so I'm clear, I have like 2-3 different ones here. Are we working at the one at the activity level or the general fund, which Ms. Bailey mentioned, which starts at 101-521100? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, you showed it. Thank you.
Okay. So beyond the beginning balances, then there's the 2 pages that are revenue sources by line item. Am I to assume there are no questions about that? Because everybody wants to move on to the next page.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
I did have a question about franchise fees, only because I guess understanding that term, and I also see that term related to ICRC as an expense. So I just wanted to understand in a somewhat general statement what those franchise fees are at 415110.
Are you not on the activity level?
Well, we started at the revenues. We're starting revenues, first page of revenues.
here.
Okay, I didn't realize we'd moved on. All right.
Well, you said no one had any questions on that part.
You need to get a better numbering system on this to identify pages we're on.
Those franchise fees, they are what flows in, and I'm not, it's not our collections. I don't know where that's coming in from LGS. I think it might be from LGS that it's coming from, but I can get you an answer. On the top of my head, I don't know.
Mr.
I know
President,
they've been flat for a while.
Ms. Orb?
Okay.
can I take a swing at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because this confused me for a very long time. So I actually called ICRC and talked to them about it, and I can't remember the lady's name I talked to because it was several years ago. But the way she explained it to me is like when you pay your cable bill and when you pay your
Internet.
yes, thank you. I was going to say Optics. I couldn't think of the name. But if you look on that bill, it says franchise fee. So basically, they collect it and then somehow it gets to us and we give it back to them. I don't know.
Thank you.
But it's,
It is directly
Just
paid.
got my brain working. Yes, they send
Yes.
us
Yeah.
this money, and they attach a bill with it for a good portion of it, that we have to pay back to them. So
Yes.
there is an expense associated with it. That's also a decent amount. I can't remember. I think it's like 60% we pay back to them.
but it does end up being a wash.
But
Well, we actually make
Money.
make
Oh.
40% on it.
Okay.
Mr. Hedger, do you have something to add to that?
No.
Okay.
But if I may, Ms. Zorb, so that particular line item, and Mr. Cropper, if you guys can verify it together, that is strictly franchise fees as it's related to internet access, ICRC, whatever that is.
Yeah, we get from.
That is my
we get
understanding.
from,
Mr.
Spectrum,
President.
and we get from Cincinnati Bell both.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ms. Bailey?
It's essentially all the bandwidths, cell phones, everything. Yeah, so it's like a bandwidth franchise fee. We can renegotiate those, and we can go back and ask for higher franchise fees. We've discussed it in the past. We just haven't moved forward with it, but it is something we can do.
Yeah, again, the only reason I bring it up, obviously, anytime we have revenue, I think that's great, right? We're good with that. But that phrase, franchise fees, and shows up later, and I wasn't sure if those two areas were related, because there was some discussion going way back on what it cost us to have ICRC here recording our meetings. And way back it was said, well, it's already included in the price, but then you turn around and you look at the budget and we see there's a big expense. And what is that expense for, and is it really free in a sense? So that's the only reason why I wanted to understand what 415110 was.
Well, just so you know, the cost of recording here, that is an add-on to what we pay. So this is an expense, recording these meetings. That is not related to the revenues that we're receiving. That is a separate and distinct. Yeah. I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 60-some thousand, yeah. So we pay a large amount for the recording of these meetings.
And that'll show up later, which obviously would be a question, but, and you're saying that specifically that line item in here that we pay roughly 60,000 or whatever is because they are here recording our meetings?
Yes, yes. I'll find out exactly how much of that, but a large portion of that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the revenue sources by line item? All right, if not, we will then move to general fund, starting at 101.101, Police Department. Questions?
Mr. President?
Mr. O'Shea?
The 523-230 dispatch fees, it looks like we're, 30% less?
Yes. So that our dispatch fees went down substantially in like September. That's part of there's some sort of an initiative with the dispatch fee that with Hamilton County. They're just, the cost went down. Now there's a revenue related to that, and I can't tell you what revenue it is, but the revenue will start diminishing also. I can't remember exactly which revenue it is. I should know. But there is a revenue, a smaller revenue that will be diminishing. I think somehow all this is tied to the sales tax in the county and a couple of other things.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
It is tied to the sales tax that was recently done, and that's why they went down for the dispatch fees. That was part of the initiative to actually decrease the fees charged to cities. So,
Ms. Bailey?
So I'm looking at 101-521-120, part-time police salaries. I do not see a 4% increase there. I see that flatlined at $90,000. So if we went on the assumption of a 4% increase, why is it not reflective there?
The line item on that, at this point in time, we do not have a approved contract with the part-time that shows any increases in it. I mean, I'm using today's facts. Maybe I should actually put something in for it, but I didn't.
Mr. President.
Well, a follow-up. Did we use the 4% model everywhere else, including administrative, fire, tax, public works?
Not everywhere on administrative, because I knew better facts there. But on fire and on police, yes.
Okay, so.
Which is the majority. There's very little. When we get into the other line items, I'll talk to them. But
Right.
the others were basically no.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger.
For when you pulled from Paycor the salaries for police, did that not include the part-time?
Yes, it did.
It did. So then would that have been included in your forecasting?
The part-time were included, but at those employees, I did not raise their salaries.
Okay.
So when I lumped the part-times into hours, I just ran those hours out at the normal average salary that they were at.
All right. I was just trying to make sure they weren't double accounted for then.
No.
All right.
Any other questions regarding the police department?
No, but yeah, I mean, I know that we have the potential contract of part-time police officers and raises in that, and so I think that we need to really think about that number being a flatlined number here and try to account for it somewhere else, because there's no way that we can just not give them a raise this year, which is going to put us more in a deficit on the back end. So,
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
I would agree. I think if you have full-time officers getting a 4% raise and part-time officers aren't getting a 4% raise, that doesn't seem quite fair to not. I mean, and giving them a 4% raise on $90,000 is $3,600. I feel like we should be able to give $3,600 or find that somewhere in the budget to make sure that they get a 4% raise.
so what are we at? 93.6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a motion.
Mr. Cropper.
Do we make a motion to
Calculated
agenda?
it as 3,600.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any room in the budget?
So,
Because that's a policy statement, right? I mean, that does, it's
Yes.
not a number statement, so.
well, this is cut to the chase, okay? I balanced this budget by going in and doing allocations. So I allocated a lot of my functions. I sat down and said, okay, what does finance do for the street levy funds? They've got money. What does Ron do for the street levy funds? What does the mayor do for the street levy funds? And I allocated salaries. And I took money from those funds, which is legal and can be done, and actually encouraged by the state auditor's office. When I was done, I was balanced. We had $20,000 left over in the budget when I'm done, or in the general fund. There is no money. I mean, the issue is, at the level of budgeting that we have, we've got an 8% salary increase. We have 4% pretty much guaranteed salary raises. I won't say across the board, but close enough. And we've got a 3.85%, which is the 27th payroll. So I'm starting out with a 7.85% increase in 80% of our costs. So there's no room. With a flat revenue, you have to start, you get back to the point where, okay, go in and look at the expenditures that are left, and those expenditures, like I said, I looked at what we spent last year. Do those items repeat? Supplies, fuel for the cars, tires for the cars. I mean, I really looked at it at that level, and I put them in. It'd be nice if they come in lighter. It's like salt. Okay, I didn't have to worry about salt because we've got a contract that we got to pay for salt next year, and it's set. So, you don't get into those kind of conversations at all. This is a fact budget. Now, did I build a 4% in for the part-time police? No, because that's not a fact yet. This is a fact budget. So when we start, I don't normally do a budget with facts only, I start getting, like I don't ignore the fact generally that August 1, we're going to have a new insurance policy for all employees. And I'm certain it's not going down, but this budget says it's staying flat. So can we negotiate something better with the insurance company? I don't know yet. I know I have done that previously because we're on an August 1 year and you don't get very many companies that want that. If we could do a stub year and start a calendar year next year, actually at Woodline I did a 17-month insurance policy and the rates came down. So is there room on some things like that? Potentially. But right now, we've got a flat revenue projection, actually down slightly, because this $80,000 that we collected here, some of that will repeat. I'm not certain how much at this point. And we really don't have any new businesses, so there's no reason to think that our income tax revenues are going to go up outside of abnormal activity. So I'm looking at a $20,000 positive balance, and I got that by doing a bunch of allocations.
Mr. President?
That's the start point, okay? So this is a start point. Can we get better? Hopefully. But this is kind of, like I said at the beginning, it's a repetitive budget. Take last year and repeat it with known facts.
Okay.
Ms. Zorb?
So this is absolutely 100% my opinion. I understand that it's legal and it's ethical and it's recommended and all of those great words to do this allocation stuff and take money out of the street levy. I personally am not a fan of that because when I drive the streets of North College Hill, I think they need fixed. So I would like to see street levy money go to our streets. That's just me. That's just my opinion. I get it. That being said, so.
And I agree with you. I don't like to do it the way that I did this.
Yeah.
But I don't know how else to do it without cutting other services.
I hear you and I see it. I just wanted to put my opinion out there into the universe. The other question I had is about the PD overtime. Mm-hmm. I know at one time you told us that there was some kind of weird thing about Paycor's reporting and that may not be. Is that factual now or is that?
So I
what
went
is that?
in for 2019. I went in and basically redid the books and records. So the books and records for 19 that you're comparing to there are correct. I booked, so I think I sent actually out so that everybody could understand what I did. I sent out a reconciliation showing the 19, and I showed what I booked in November, in December for, and I actually showed the Paycor calculations by employee. I took their names off and their socials off. But there is all the information, and there's what flowed in, and then I went down and saw, okay, we had salaries of X. We're in November and salaries this. We paid this in December. And in some cases, we had recorded so much salary expense that, I recorded a negative salary expense for December. So I rebalanced everything. That was just, I had to do that. I rebalanced everything. No Medicare tax had been recorded until October. We just left it as a zero. It was actually being recorded in salary expense. This is balanced. I went to Paycor, downloaded 19 after the end of the year, and just started pushing 19 out, pushing the hours into 20, and making the 20 budget, like I said, based on this is what they make, here's the raises, here's another payroll.
All right.
Just
cool.
Push.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's not
Mr.
perfect,
President.
but it's it's a start.
Mr. Hedger?
Again, I think that the part-time should again receive a 4% increase. Looking here at their budget, I think we can find some savings within the police department, general fund, and their levy. That could at least, if not all, take all the increased expense for giving them a raise. There are some funds that encumbered no expense last year or the last couple of years, and now we are expending it. I don't know, obviously, what the projection or forecasting showed, but all I can see is the numbers that we have here now. Let's try to get back to them. So, for example, equipment repair and maintenance and the police levy fund, I know we're not there, but still important to explaining this. There was $0 expense from 2018 and 2019, and now we're budgeting $2,000. There's a $1,000 expense, again, that was budgeted for 2019 and 2020, and $0 were expense for both of those, for both 2018 and 2019. So I think there is room to make sure that they receive that raise, and I think that should be important for us to do. I don't think it should be fair that one set of officers, just because you're full-time, you get a 4% raise, and then part-time, you only get a 0% raise, a 1% raise, whatever it might be.
Mr. President?
Mr. O'Shea?
Though I agree, obviously, the numbers need to be considered somewhere. We have not, as a council, reviewed the current contract, the proposed contract for the part-time police. So I think at this point, it's really not something that we can dwell on or we should dwell on as it relates to this meeting.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
I would disagree, because if we are budgeting for the year, we know that we are negotiating a contract as we speak. We know there's going to be raises coming. To have a budget that we know we're going to have an expense incurred on is not really creating a factual budget. I think, we know we're having a raise. We should anticipate at least for 4% if that's what they're going to negotiate for. And then if it's lower, then that's great for our overall budget. We'll be under. But to say that we're not going to budget for it, for any raise, and just keep it the same, I don't think is factual.
Mr. President.
Mr. Miller-Novak?
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cropper. This is a budget, and it's subject to change throughout the year.
Correct.
I think that's kind of the issue. We've got contracts to review. I know that you mentioned something about the equipment fund, for instance. There might be a point where we realize we do need it or don't need it. The problem is if you need, it's easy to say, well, last year we didn't spend anything on the equipment fund, therefore we won't need to spend anything on the equipment fund this year, but that's not necessarily how life works out all the time. Exactly. Sometimes you set money aside in your own savings account that if your furnace breaks down, you'll have money to fix it, and the furnace doesn't break down, that doesn't mean it won't next year. So I think that jumping to, when we're dealing with the headroom of 20 grand, and just assuming some of these funds, just because we didn't need them in past years, we won't need them this year. If you're wrong about that, and we find out about that in May or June or July, and something really bad happens with the equipment, and we've zeroed out that account, you can't put that back after you've taken it away. And a budget is fluid. I know we're passing it today, and I understand we want it to be, well, not passing it today. We're working on passing it very soon, because it's due very soon. And I know that we want it to be as good as possible. We have to realize that money can always be reappropriated, moved from one place to another for various expenses, because we might find out something we budget today is inadequate for the future, and we're going to have to take money from one place in this budget and move it there anyways.
Mr. President.
And I would hope, and this is why I'm sorry, Mr. President, I would hope that, and the reason I started out with this Rita statement, I would hope that we have a pleasant surprise on some of this $370,000. I just don't know how much we can count on out of that, and I've counted on a little bit of it. So I hope to be pleasantly surprised. So, that's the other side of that coin, is that maybe I'm looking for a little wiggle room there in an upward revenue. So, again, I'm less concerned about, I think we can hit these expense numbers, and I'm pretty confident we can hit these revenue numbers. I'm hoping that the upside is on the revenues. I don't see a tremendous amount of downward room in this budget. There's some, there's always some, but when we're looking for downward room in this budget, we're going to be looking at $1,000 line items. And you're not going to make much wiggle room working with $1,000 line items.
We only need to find 3,600.
Mr. Higgins.
So I agree with everything that was just said, that yes, we don't know what's going to be expensed in these line items, that yes, the budget is fluid, that we can change it. But we do know that this year there will be raises for police officers, for the part-time staff. That is something, we know it's probably going to come. They're going to ask for something. That's what they're going to try to negotiate for. It's not something we don't know that's going to happen. We don't know if that equipment's going to break down. We do know that negotiation is happening. So there should be some wiggle room, I think, put to that. And everything else is obviously we don't know yet. We don't know what's going to happen. I agree with that. And that can change. We can add more money to that line item. But I think it is important to show to the officers who are part-time that we do care for their service and that they should be given a raise, that we are at least anticipating some type of raise for them. Because I don't think it's fair to give full-timers a raise of 4% and then say to part-timers, you're not getting a raise, even though they got back paid for the past year.
Okay, Mr. President.
Mr. Miller-Novak.
It's fine. That's all policy, and I think that's wonderful to say that, and I get that, and I would love everybody to have a raise, and it's not about disrespecting the officers or anything. I mean, the reality is with part-time, we have a lot of high turnover on part-time anyways, so you're discussing it as if these are long-term employees that we're completely screwing over, and I don't necessarily agree with that. Number two, we're in a contract negotiation. There's no reason that we want to project how much we're thinking about giving a person a raise. We're just weakening our bargaining power by doing that, and that's not what you do in a labor negotiation. And number three, everything you just said is policy. At the end of the day, that's great. We can talk about policy, and that's wonderful. We should do that on an ongoing basis all the time in our committee meetings. But today what we need to do is decide what number goes from here to there, because we ultimately have to pass this thing, and talking about generalities and pontificating about these things all night is not very helpful. It's not very productive today. We need to just get down to brass tacks and come up with some numbers. That's it.
I do have one question. When do raises go into effect for the police officers?
January 1.
They do go, okay.
They've already have.
All right, are there any other questions not regarding the part-time police officers?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I just have one comment to make, and I know a couple years ago we beat this horse to death, but I want to reiterate that a line item in the budget does not constitute a salary.
Correct. Sure doesn't.
I have something. Thank you.
All right, anything else on this page?
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
so, okay. I just want to make sure I understand, and I know that I'm understanding what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the line item PD overtime, 521140. So it looks like in 2017, it was 168,575. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
And then in 2018, it was 118,634. I'm correct in that?
That's correct.
I got it.
And then for 2019, it went down to 77,173?
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, let's turn the page. 101.102, General Fund for Fire Department. Any questions?
And as we look at the fire department, let me make a statement too. Sorry, I keep having to make statements.
I'll just let you make those from here on out.
I apologize. Hey, I open the mouth and it comes out, sorry. So when you look at the fire department and the police department, their levy funds, you have to combine those funds, what's in the levy fund when you look at it also. So, I mean, police and payroll, fire and payroll, we don't even split them out. We just, throughout the year, we take so much out of the levy, because as long as it comes out of the levy for police or comes out for fire, it doesn't have a special purpose other than the fact that it's police or it's fire. So basically, we spend it to zero, or effectively to zero, and the rest comes out of the general fund. That's how the police and fire levies work. So if you look at, and you'll see like one of the funds, I think it might have been on fire, actually, you saw salary expense in the fire levy was actually down year over year in the fire levy fund, I believe it was. But it's because there wasn't enough money left over in that fund. I had to take more out of the general fund to leave it at zero. I had to drive negative. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey.
so currently, at the moment, our fire equipment fund, right, it is not written that dispatch fees can be taken from that fund. So with that coming out of the general fund, so essentially what it is the dispatch fees were taken out of the general fund and put into the fire equipment fund. So that's why there are $0 in dispatch fees. So we either need to go back and amend the old ordinance that we passed to include dispatch fees, building, capital outlay, uniforms, or else part of this budget isn't going to work. So if you find the fire equipment page, which is one of these back here.
It's Fund 211,
211, okay.
toward the back.
So if you guys will remember, and Mr. Miller Novak, I'm not beating a dead horse, but back in the day, I don't know if it was, I think it was 18. It was 18. We passed an ordinance. I think Mary Jo and I were probably the only ones up here for the fire equipment fund to go to fire equipment for leasing, purchasing, maintaining, and leaving it strictly at that because this fund had been dwindled in years past and we hadn't gotten any fire equipment or maintained the fire equipment that we had. So the ordinance that we passed is very, very strict on what we can use it for. So dispatch fees is not part of that at all. And so some of the moving of the money between these two, we're going to have to either A, amend our old ordinance, or B, shuffle around. So between the two. I can email all of you guys a copy of that ordinance, but
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
I guess just to verify that what Mr. Cropper did, I mean, you pulled it from the fire equipment fund?
I have a reimbursement, a transfer back of $60,000 to cover salaries for a partial amount of salaries to the EMTs that are making these runs to the general fund. Now, if that's not allowed, then we need to either correct that 60 and find another $60,000 somewhere in the general fund.
Well, so are you saying that 60 is related to the dispatch fees that Ms. Bailey's talking about?
No, I think she is referring to the 21,000 up there. Where
Yes.
we've always been expensing dispatch fees out of this fund. We've done that we've never stopped. I mean, if you look at last year, if you look at the year before, dispatch fees have been paid out of this fund. What I did differently this year was I took, you see the transfer out of $60,000 at the very
Oh, yeah, I
bottom?
saw that.
Yeah, so that is a $60,000 reimbursement. We had talked at some point last year, I have paperwork where we had talked about $50,000 being a reimbursement, and we are making substantially more. I mean, we could easily take $110,000 out of here based on the EMT runs that are getting repaid in that $276,000 revenue line item. I don't, right now, every dime of our EMT runs, or EMS services, comes into this fund. None of it goes to the general fund. All of the employees are paid either out of the fire levy fund or the general fund. So all the revenues associated with the increased EMT activities, EMS services activities, all the revenues, the growth in that is going to this fund with no ability to fund that out of the general fund. So, and a solution that I have offered here is to move that $60,000. And that will leave $72,000 in a fire equipment fund. But if we need to change a resolution to do what I'd like to do, then that would be my ask to council to make that change to our resolutions, or to change. Again, it's a matter of our expenditures on the fire side have gone up pretty dramatically the past few years. Our services are starting to go up revenue-wise nicely, but the general fund can't afford that activity without some of those revenues coming back.
Mr. President.
Mr. O'Shea.
Mr. Cropper, I think the concern, well, this is a little different. I think we definitely will have to, at some point, address Ms. Bailey's concern as it relates to the legislation. And obviously, if the legislation says we can't move it, whether we've done it in the past or not, now we can't.
Correct.
So we need to address that as council. We need to figure out how we want to handle that. Do we say find the money somewhere else? You can't take it from there, et cetera, or do we go back and change the legislation? But where I was really headed with my statement or question was the concern. My understanding of what you said as it relates to the fire department getting this revenue, but that we need to reimburse the general fund because they're getting this money as revenue from their EMS runs. And one of my concerns with that is that over the years, so now I'm a little concerned at the way these numbers are. Over the years, if our general fund was originally established to give $500,000 before the levy, and then we get a levy for the fire department, and the general fund all of a sudden goes down to $400,000 because administration at that time said, well, hey, they're getting this levy money, we don't need to give them this money from the general fund. Now I have a problem with that mentality. And what I don't know is how these numbers in this budget, even the historical ones, reflect any of that. And so my concern is that you're saying, well, they're making all this money through their EMS runs, so we're going to make them give $60,000 back to the general fund. And so now we're taking money from the fire department then to where now they're not going to have money to do what they need to do.
Actually, let me address that a little different way. So the reality of this is, we just gave, in this budget, and in last year, towards the end of the year, we put it all through, we gave nearly 8% raises, and this year we got a 27th payroll. So a 4% raise last year, a 4% increase this year. We have an overwhelming amount of increased expenditures in staff expense. The general fund does not have the revenues to cover it. So we can either cut these services and they don't come in at all because we don't have these services to offer, then we don't have the expense, or we can allocate part of the revenue that comes in with it back to cover the expenditures. There is no in between. The services, the hours worked to provide these services cost this much based on current contracts that we have. We can remove the hours and lower the dollars, or we can figure out a little more inventive ways to do it. This is a little more inventive way to do it. It is one or the other. Those hours have to be paid for. We have contracts that says we are going to pay these dollars.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hedger.
do we have a negotiated contract with fire for raises this next year? Has that happened?
For part-time, yes.
For part-time?
For
For
fire, we
fire?
only have 3 full-timers.
Yeah.
All right. Do we know how long the raises are, how much they are? Are they 4% as well?
Yeah, it's basically a 4% raise.
All right. And how many more years they have?
I'm not certain how many more years now.
All right. Because my understanding, they did not get a raise this year. That's firefighters? Or is that just salaried? Anyone?
I think, was it the Chiefs that didn't,
Like it, I'm just trying to remember. I can't remember, so.
or was that last year?
I'm not certain, but
Last year? That was last year.
from the fire department standpoint, though, we've got, I mean, we have some expenses there that, you know, we're kind of skirting already. I mean, we've got part-time employees working over 3,000 hours a year. And we are not paying, you know, 20-some% OP&F to employees that are working over 3,000 hours a year. So, I mean, we can talk this battle to death, but I'm a little concerned about that one.
Any other questions on this page? All right, next page, General Fund 101.301, Recreation Department.
Mr. President?
Mr. O'Shea.
Mr. Cropper, can you explain the gas and electric expense for a recreation department?
Yes. The park, though we're working right now to change that. I'm working with Marty to get the services pulled out of that building over there at Pice Park, because we currently pay, we just started working on this last week. We pay like $147 a month for a gas and electric hookup. That we're not quite certain why we pay that.
Okay.
So that may go way down, but right now.
But is that strictly for that facility? It's no other facilities?
It's the building, it's the park and the building behind it, sorry, and the building behind it. And the major cost is a gas hookup, and it's like everything there is electric. There's a gas line, but, you know, again, it's something that needs to be fixed, and, you know, that number might go to a couple $100. But we're working on it.
All right, thank you.
Just found it.
Any other questions on Recreation Department? All right, next page. 101.401, Code Enforcement. Any questions on the 101.402, Building Zoning Department? Next page, 101.449, Community Environment.
Mr. President?
Questions? Yes, Mr. O'Shea.
I'd like an explanation on the rents and leases for Pies Park. I know we were renegotiating and all that. Is this an actual number? Is this?
The current unsigned contract calls for $4,000.
Okay.
So I guess from a factual standpoint, I'm sorry, I screwed up there. That's not fact yet.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions for this page? Next page, 101.500, General Utilities. Questions?
There is an increase there in our gas and electric for one reason. For some reason, we only had 11 bills for this building last year. So I've got 12 in for next year. I don't know whether we paid a bill early or what, but I literally only found 11 bills.
They gave us a break.
Come on.
For being in this building, yes.
All right, no questions on this page. Next page is 101.600, information technology.
Mr. President,
Ms. Bailey?
I would ask for 523705, the website, is that just for maintaining our current website the way that it stands?
That is correct.
Okay,
And I know we have reached, or Ron has reached out to a couple of vendors to get some sort of a proposal to get a better process, because we're not happy with our website.
I don't think that anyone is like truly happy with it. However, we just had it redone in last year. It was redone last year. Yeah, completely.
Well, it was 2.
It was definitely last year because that's where
There-
those came from.
Yeah, the original charge we saw to build that site was like $25,000.
Correct.
It's 48 pages and nobody can maintain it.
I can find anything.
None of the links work.
I don't know if we necessarily do an RFP to create a whole new website, or maybe we just bring in a consultant to condense down the 48 pages. And
I think that's the process that Ron's looking at. He's looking
Okay.
into it, but it's like, yeah, we're not looking at remaking the wheel, because I don't think we
I thought it was the hosting services that they're relooking at, not necessarily the website. It is the website?
hosting is done by the same.
Well, I think
I
it's
don't
part of the
believe it is.
issue with Civics Plus.
Yes.
So Civics Plus, I think, is what we're looking at changing.
Isn't that the host?
I think it's also the software that creates the page or pages. So if you didn't, I think we could pay a different host and still use Civic Plus, or we could use something other than Civic Plus on the current host, but I don't know for sure.
All right. It doesn't matter at this
Yeah,
point.
Any other questions on information technology?
But I know that this is a factual budget, but that whole RFP process of maybe condensing this down on our IT services is not reflective here at all, is it?
No.
Okay,
No, I mean, this is basically where we are today.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next page, 101.701, mayor and administration. Questions? Last call for questions.
Just one real quick. The 30,000 in economic development, didn't we talk about having a position that would be both like a assistant city administrator and a mayor's assistant and an economic developer? Or grant writing? Which one was it?
It was both.
That
Yeah.
was, I remember that being bounced around.
There was discussion. I either need to put on. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, the $30,000. That amount, even for the clerical, administration will be down. It's actually, that's not the actual number. And if that's something that council wants us to consider, the dollar amount is there for the economic development. Otherwise, if you want to put it elsewhere, then we have to think on other things and come up with other resources for our economic development.
Do we know offhand the full-time clerical administration number off of hand?
Well, the amount, we wanted to keep it where it was pretty much last year.
Okay,
I believe it's 32.5.
okay.
Mr. President. So I'm going to stay on that professional services economic development for a second, and I thought, maybe I'm wrong, you guys passed something in the 5 days I was out. But I didn't think that we had any legislation passed to approve that, did we?
No, ma'am.
No.
So I'll go back to your statement and say that this is a factual budget, and so that's a proposed budget.
So the 30, I know that I've talked to Ron about this one and working with Ron, and frankly, I thought that we had approved a 30,000 line item, and it's not for a person, it's for,
An entity, I understand, but
HC.
no matter what it's for,
HCDC.
I didn't think it was approved by council. That's my only point.
Okay, so I thought something had been approved. If it hasn't, then obviously that's a
So
30,000 that we can
can
talk
anyone
Mr.
tell me,
President,
was that approved by council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Nichols?
I think there was discussion about Mr. Mosby actually going out, seeing if he could find numbers, get numbers on services. I believe, was that in a committee meeting? Where that discussion, where that was discussed?
I remember a number of discussions
There was a
about it.
number.
Yeah.
And there was no negative feedback about
Right.
doing it that I recall. We all agreed that we wanted to invest in economic development. And I remember this being the numbers thrown around. Was there a resolution that was passed specifically? I don't think so. But it was discussed at great length, and I didn't hear anybody have any negative feedback. There was an economic development company that came in and did a presentation. I know we were kind of looking at them. I know Ron had talked about them. I don't remember the conversation about one person wearing three different hats,
We had that conversation too, and then.
or I would have had something negative to say about that because
But
it's a
then we
terrible
decided-
idea. But I mean, but I do recall tons of discussion about starting to invest in economic development over multiple meetings.
And I've looked at hiring an economic development person for a village, and that person was going to cost about $140,000 a year. So it was, no, we can't do that.
Yeah,
So-
no, full-time's more expensive. I know
But the
Yeah.
the HCDCs and the places like that we're not members of currently, that, those are things that, that may not be the perfect example, HCDC, but they all have higher fees associated with them, and if you're going to be active, then you have to join. I'm a member of Queen City Angels, and I know we work with these groups when,
was it a biker gang?
yeah,
Leather. They wear leather.
Oh, yeah.
nah, they're all these bunch of old P&G guys, retired P&G types. But
You can pull off chaps.
seriously, I mean, everybody that all the angel capital that's being dealt with and stuff, and all the new businesses looking for places, they're going to, I keep using HCDC, but there's multiple others.
Yeah.
And if you're not a member, you're not in on the initial talks, and if you miss the initial talks, you're gone.
Mr.
Ms. Bailey, yes.
But we would still need an appropriation ordinance for it.
Not if
No,
it's
we
in the
don't. It's in
budget.
the budget. This is
Okay.
what this is. I mean, we're budgeting
We will
for it.
need, with this, but yes.
Yeah, we have to pass we have to pass something to pass the budget, but then it would be budgeted for that.
Right.
And then set aside. Right? Am I wrong about that?
No, you're
That's
correct.
Okay.
That's once it's approved in the budget, Now, there's probably I'm not certain what our resolution is for the maximum that Ron can spend without coming to council. By state law, most of the places it's $50,000. Most, I think it's $50,000. And other places, they have as small as $10,000. That is the max you can expend without getting council approval. But it's, there's some level there of a single expenditure. How much can it be? But
Well, we have to have
30,000
it
would
in
be
the bank
approved.
account, though. We have to have it in the bank account, though. And
That's always a good thing.
We're that close.
We are cash basis, so it's,
Yeah.
Also, in this area of this budget, it is my understanding that we paid for our previous city administrator's health insurance for quite some time after she was already gone, and we are waiting to be reimbursed for that. Do we know how that's going to affect this as far as getting a refund for paying for her health insurance versus when she was here, when she left?
I have no clue about this,
Okay.
but that is something that should be dealt with.
Okay,
But it will be a revenue when it comes back in, remember, not a expense.
right. I just
So-
wanted to know if we roughly knew that number of revenue to see if it would,
It's the first
Flow
time
back
I
in.
have heard about it.
okay.
So just so you know, when something like that happens, if we were going through an audit, which we will next time by the Auditor of State, when they come through and they look at items that have been spent like that, they issue what's called a finding for recovery. And the finding for recovery has the name of whoever authorized that payment and has who it was paid to, the insurance company, and had who it was paid on behalf of. So it will have a finding for recovery that we, the city, will have to act upon. So that's the kind of activity that happens going forward. Now, if that happened in 2019, 2019 will be audited next year, 2021, by the State Auditor's Office. They will look at that.
Well, you probably want to get a jump on it, because it's going to happen.
Well,
So,
being this is the first time I've heard about it,
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on this page? All right, next page, 101.702, legislative.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
going back to the franchise fees issue, I just wanted to verify that this was the area that we were talking that we're paying approximately $56,000 to have ICRC-TV come in here and record our meetings.
correct. This piece is not related to the franchise fee coming in.
Okay.
This is a pure out-of-pocket expense.
Okay.
So yes, so what I was talking about earlier is actually an expenditure elsewhere in here, where the fees that we collect, we then turn around and pay a percentage of those back, but that's not paid out of the legislative item. This is actually the cost of filming these meetings,
Strictly.
strictly.
Okay, maybe you can help us understand and maybe you have no idea, right? I get it. Why we would have been originally under the impression that was already, that service was included as part of a service in that whole franchising issue.
I have no clue how that.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were saying, no, that's not true, or no, you don't have a clue. So that's,
No, have you saw the mysticism in my face?
okay. So, all right.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
yes, I have a question about that line item as well. Why is there a fluctuation, if you know, in the price of what we pay to have our meetings recorded?
It could be number of meetings.
Mr. President?
I don't know.
I would say,
Ms. Bailey?
I would say definitely the number of meetings, but also there almost had to be an uptick in price to go from 36,000 to 56,000, 18 to 19. Or quite often, I know that at the end of 18, there was a dramatic number of bills not paid that got paid in 19 because we were low on cash. I mean, reality, we're cash basis. And things were not encumbered, and things did not get paid till 19. So that could have been that.
Mr. President, it is not either of those at all. It was in 2018, they were only filming our council meetings. In 2018, we started bringing them into all of our committee meetings.
There's a number of meetings.
Right, it's the number of meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir. For our membership fees, we haven't spent anything from membership fees yet. We still have $2,500 appropriated for 2020, and that kind of seems as a little bit of a waste a little bit because we've spent nothing in 3 years. I do think that maybe we take some of that and put into training and education, as there are a number of trainings coming up that people have expressed interest in going to. Just a suggestion.
Mr. President?
Mr. O'Shea?
Mr. Cropper, would you, maybe, Madam Mayor, be able to explain what the intent for membership fees would have been or is?
Mr. Cropper?
I do not know off the top of my head. I know that there are several that we are members of, but they've been reduced a lot, so maybe that number should have come down more than, I see that we only paid $3,200 last year.
Where do you see that?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I'm looking at the total down below. I see this, the $2,500 for membership fees.
Yeah.
I know we pay some, but it's like, I'm not certain which ones they are, so I'm not certain where they're coming out of.
It's not listed
Zero.
in the actual. If you
Yeah.
said we paid some last year, I don't see any.
Unless it wasn't legislative, maybe it came out of mayor and administration or something.
Yeah, there are a couple. Yeah, so maybe,
Well, then that will take you back to 101-701 under 701-524-220. Memberships and subscriptions, are you saying that's where it was paid from?
probably everything was paid out of there. Yeah, so I don't know, the $2,500 then probably is something that shouldn't have been repetitive. I don't know, I thought we paid something out of it, but there's a zero there.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I would agree with Ms. Bailey, and let's just move that 2,500 up into training and education.
For a total of 28.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we don't have the motion.
Yeah.
We're allowed to just do it.
Somebody I got over here keeps saying, make a motion, so. Scratch out the 25, make the top of 28.
Did someone make a motion?
Well, since we're in a committee, I don't know if that's,
I don't think we have
but
to.
I think, Mr. Cropper,
I'll just do it.
Did you recognize-
Everybody,
Yeah.
I see no reason not to do that.
So you're moving it from 524,220 to 523,450.
Correct.
agreed.
Any other questions?
Yes, one more. Part-time for clerk of council. I do believe that that number, including the extra payroll next year, should be increased by one payroll, shouldn't it?
No, it's monthly.
Oh, okay. So so then the increase from 19 to 20 for legislative, Where does that increase come from?
So, yes, I don't know whether we had some shortages in prior year, whether we had some periods where we didn't have people in offices.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a lot of changeover, so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But when I went in, I basically I know we had a couple of odd things in January that had some odd dollars, and that's why it came out to that odd number.
All right, next page, 101.703, Mayor's Court. Any questions? All right, next page, 101.704, Finance Department.
So for part-time salaries for finance, remind me again of that increase. I know.
So the person that is currently in the tax, or was in the tax role, has been hired on a permanent basis for this role, and we also still have a part-time person that is going to be working there through the end of March. So we have a little overlap for now.
Mr. President.
Ms. Zorb?
I'm sorry, Mr. Cropper, you said the part-time person is only working until the end of March?
We may, if we continue to have the tax issues that we're having with so many requests from Rita and my former tax person that is having difficulties getting away from the Rita work, we may have to talk Scarlett into staying a little longer. I could beg her. I think she would stay. She would really like not to be working anymore, but.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'm looking at line 521120. I guess I'm not understanding why there's such a huge difference from 2019 to 2020.
We now have a person that formerly was working in the tax area only, and paying a full salary out of there. We're not going to be paying anybody out of there any longer. There'll still be tax duties to be done, and that person will be working a 32-hour approximate week in the role in the finance department. So the combination this year of that person plus the current part-time person for part of the year, that's what it's going to come out to.
Oh, okay. Sorry, no, if you go to the income tax page too, you'll see that it has been taken out of, I was having a hard time digesting that one. If you go to the general fund income tax department, you'll see that 19,000 of it has been
I got a lot of
taken from that and added to that. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry for the long
Two more
okay,
pages.
but sometimes I have to stand them next to each other to like fully get the whole picture. So
Yeah, man.
Any other questions?
I do, sorry, I can't get the words out. Mr. President, that's the words I wanted to use.
Ms. Zorb?
Thank you. But even at that, we'll round up and say there was 20,000 actual and 19 under salaries part-time in the finance and 19,000 salaries part-time in the income tax, that doesn't add up to 56.
No.
So what am I
Using special
missing?
math.
You're missing the pure and simple fact that we didn't do much in 19. The books and records were not kept properly. We paid 2 people to work some hours here and there. We had a person coming in part-time doing a lot of the financial work over here. And I spent 2 months almost fixing the books and records for 19. We're not going to do that in 20. We're going to do them right to begin with. We can't record activities however we just feel like recording activities that we need to be recorded properly.
I'm not
and on
judging.
time.
I'm trying to understand. I promise I'm not judging. I'm just
Okay.
trying to get it.
So in a 32-hour-a-week person at the salary that person is being paid, plus the part-time person for, I'm guessing, 4 months, is going to be that cost. I mean, I can calculate it out for you if you need it.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
so you just mentioned that, so I'm assuming that these are not the same people who work in those roles where the numbers were not correct or recorded correctly. Am I correct in saying that?
They are the same people in those roles. The difference is they did not have those duties. Nobody had those duties.
Okay.
They were being asked, one person was the tax person, and she did not do any of the work except for the tax work. The other person came in as she could and worked part-time, and she did accounts payable and payroll. There wasn't a lot of stuff got recorded correctly.
Okay, so I just want you to explain this to me like I'm 5 years old.
Okay.
So there was a person A and person B, and they did not do things correctly. And person A and person B are still now in those same roles?
No,
Like you had to fix things because they weren't done correctly? Okay. If I'm misstating that, please just
let me.
explain it to me.
I'm going to. The person in the role that was guiding the people, the work was not done. So.
Okay, that
we-
person right there, okay, the person that you just discussed, is that person still working here?
No, that person is not working here.
Okay,
Hang on, he brought the manager into that conversation. So like the mayor said, there's A, B, and C now.
Okay.
Not just A and B.
okay.
So, correct. So there are a variety of things. I mean, it's like a lot of places. When you have a history of things not being recorded correctly for a while, I mean, 18 things were done correctly. 18 things were recorded very properly. 19, I do not know what the shortfall was in recordings. But, when you get to the end of the year and you have activities that just haven't been recorded correctly, they have to be fixed. We had, the person that's worked part-time here, the fact that she was doing the amount of work she did for $19,000 was phenomenal. But that's not practical. It's not going to happen.
Mr. President,
Ms. Nichols?
if I could, we said there was A, B, and C. I'll talk about B and C. From my understanding, one will leave. The one who has been here primarily the majority of the time, not part-time, she'll take on the duties of the part-time person as well. So instead of 2 bodies, there'll just be 1. And I'm assuming if Scarlett leaves at the end of March, she's to train the person who's there now with her.
Right.
And she'll do all the duties, even the other small taxes that come in that weren't sent to Rita, if that explains it a little better. That's probably where you see the small increase in the salary for her. But I still don't think she'll be doing 40 hours, will she?
32.
She'll do 32, but she'll take on additional duties. So it'll just be an A.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
So the expectation would be, if things really don't change, that in 2021,
Goes down.
there'll be one person that's working 32 hours. That would be, that's the general expectation.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, currently, as we're wrapping up this tax and stuff, the person in that role, she's working more than 32 hours right now. But she spends 8 to 16 hours a week on tax still. Rita, we had to pull 400 records the other day and go through 400 files after pulling them and get them the information that they needed. That was 16 hours of work that had nothing to do with, her current job.
Okay. Let's move to the next page, 101.706, Law Department.
Actually, I have one more on the previous page. Sorry. I was looking for something. Professional services, can you just give me a brief overview, like super quick, on why that hiked so rapidly? Oh,
Professional services or development?
professional services.
523, 400.
523, 400?
So are we paying you out of both?
I'm not an employee.
So who is salaries full-time professional?
That will be the person that's hired eventually.
Hopefully in 2020.
Okay, so professional services is you
Yes.
Okay.
at 35? Okay. Okay. So when, okay,
That's approximately 3 months.
Okay.
So where I've estimated that's approximately 3 months.
then the estimate, then
Is 9
60
months.
would be the remainder of the year for the salary?
Yeah.
Would that include the OPERS contributions that are commensurate with that salary because there's a
Yes.
state mandate,
Yes.
whatever the percentage is currently? So then, part of the OPERS, which is the 16,240, would be the amount of contributions as commensurate.
Basically, I think
with
that's
that.
14% of the number above it. It should be.
Yeah, I don't know, man, that's your job.
Apologize. I got my calculator. I'm just not going to grab it.
I
and
got
use
one
it.
on my phone, but, I don't have any reason to doubt it, but I'm just asking, like, so like the 16.
Well, when you tell me it's 13.9, I'm going to laugh at you.
I didn't memorize the statute. I just know there's a required compulsory amount that we must pay. Cool. All right, thanks. That makes sense to me.
But I guess I just have a different, Mr. Miller Novak, this one's for you. But based off of our charter, we're supposed to set salaries and staffing levels for the departments.
Yeah.
But we haven't set anything near this, and we still have financial assistant part-time 1 and 2. So is that like another follow-up that needs to be, I'm just trying to make sure we're following our charter when it comes to.
We didn't include a finance director?
Yes, we did.
But we didn't
Still had a
include
finance-
somebody
Going past that.
that would be at 32 hours. We included a financial assistant 1 and 2 at $19 an hour and $16 an hour.
All that does is set the salary for somebody. They put that person in the position.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like, so if you look at the charter, you're looking at section 3, we have the responsibility set,
Ranges.
like, yeah, I mean, we set
Okay.
the salary, we don't set the person, right?
Correct.
You set the
Okay.
position and the salary, and as long as, I would say that the administration doesn't go over it
So
for some pot-to-go.
I think the way it works is you actually set the range for a position. Basically, with the new hire, we hire in the range, and then after that, as raises are given, you actually approve the raise and then approve the actual salary. But you approve the range for the hire.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
Now, we set the
We
salary.
set specific salaries.
Yeah.
And I guess one could say that would be a maximum, but really the way it's worded, that is the salary of that position.
It's a pay
There's
ordinance,
no,
right?
yeah.
It's essentially what we do. So when we
We would
set a
say that
range, you might
we-
appropriate money.
So-
Like you're going to go hire somebody, we'll appropriate this and kind of give you a little bit of a range. But at the end of the day, once you guys were to hire someone and say, we're going to hire this person at $75,000 a year or something like that, you would come back. Technically, we should really pass a salary ordinance.
So when,
Yeah.
We
when
already,
a person is
salary's already
replaced-
set by ordinance before that.
Right.
We should set our range.
So he
But if
can't
they-
come back.
Well, but if they need more, you'd have to,
Well-
or whatever.
So if you replace a person, that person's salary, so do you have to go to council before you can make an offer to a person? Is that what I just heard?
Yes,
It's always been
kind
a
of.
little
That's like
pitching
crazy.
post that we've
Well-
always dealt with.
That's why our charter's
So
written.
basically, our salary ordinance last year, we have 32.5. I mean, it's right under it.
Yeah.
For two positions last year, the yearly amount, if they were working 32 hours, would be 58,639. I mean, but yes, essentially we do set salaries. It's what we do. And
Specific salaries.
yes.
Unfortunately, the charter says under 306 that we set the number of employees and their salaries. The word salary is used. So it is what it is. We all got to deal with it.
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
I know this is set for $60,000, and that's a little low, but
Was for 2/3 or 3/4.
It's only
But it
3/4.
also adds the 35,000.
yeah, it's-
Yeah, it's like 9 months.
You remind me
Is
of
what
it.
he said.
Yeah.
That I'm going to recite this again. So the 35,000 has to do with his current 1099 status for until that.
No, you're paying,
He's employed technically by Robert Half, so we are paying Robert Half for his services.
It's a contract.
Okay.
He's
So we're contracting a company, and this $35,000 amount is the future that until that kind of expires and we hire an employee, and the 60,000 is the projection for the remainder of the 2020 budget for the employee to do the finance director job, and the OPERS is set at the percentage that would be commensurate with 60,000 for the remainder of the year. Yes, stuck the landing? Did I stick the landing?
Dude, it wasn't complicated.
you're there.
Yeah, but I made it sound much easier.
All right.
I apologize.
rest of us all knew what
We were already there.
Great job, Mr. Miller Novak. Yes. General Fund 101.706, Law Department.
Great job.
On,
Thank you. I do work for.
Any questions on the Law Department?
absolutely. On 706-523-400, I do think that, given our history here, 15,000 is definitely an understatement. So I just want that to be on record, that legal contract fees at 15,000, and we just started negotiating a part-time police contract, and we have a Rumpke one coming up.
That's not what that
No,
is.
No?
Legal contract fees is for legal services.
Oh, outside of that, yeah,
Yes. That's not like every contract we enter into.
yeah. Right, yeah. So,
That's if we need to hire an outside law firm for something, and so. And, for instance, if we were to take out a bond or something like that, a lot of times the city has to hire a special bond counsel, because even most firms that provide law director services don't necessarily have an internal bond attorney or something. It's a very highly specified field, so it's stuff like that. But still, nonetheless, looking at the last few years,
well,
it does frighten me a little bit.
I know that,
Mr. Miller Novak,
We-
we did have a talk about that, and we intentionally did that because, as we discussed and as you rightly pointed out, there have been certain litigations that have taken place over the past couple of years of a fairly significant nature. And for us, we have not, I think we have resolved all of the ones. We don't have anything at this particular point on the horizon, hence that's why.
Well, I know that part of this too, from last year, was part of the errata liquor hearing and using extra hours above what we already have to negotiate that and to go up there in,
2 years ago.
was that 2 years ago? But it's stuff like that. We never know when we're going to get a vagabond trying to get a liquor permit that we have to shut down. It is what it is. There were strippers beat up. Like, it was a long thing. So I think that 15,000 is still low. One could hope, but
Let's just all behave. Be on our best
all-
behavior
With
until
us?
2021.
We all just get along.
Yeah.
with
All right.
us.
Any other questions on this page?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea?
for Ms. Bailey, because I think she may have some information handy, on the salaries part-time, that's obviously for the law director. Do you know, is that the right number that we, or is that less than, or is that more than the number that we appropriated? Or, well, no, that we budgeted, that we agreed upon in the ordinance when we set the salary.
In the salary ordinance that I have, we have 33,619 is what we have.
That was the ordinance this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, that should be the same.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
it is, except now here's a question that is a legal question, and I have come across this before. So when you have salaried individuals and you have a 27 payroll year and they're paid biweekly, what do we pay them? Do we lower their biweekly salary so that we pay them the same annual salary?
Oh, so does that come in? Oh,
That's what my boss did this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's set as an annual salary on the
About-
ordinance, right?
it is.
14% of the companies in the
Yeah.
United States lower the salary, 86% leave the
Can you write that
Biweekly.
down on paper and sign it so I can take it to my boss?
No,
I mean,
looked
I'm
this
just,
up.
yeah.
I went and looked this up. The series,
Yeah.
it's an 86-14, but there are 14% of the employers that if you have a contract that says X dollars, then that contract gets divided by 27 in a 27 payroll year.
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
well, it,
This is the
but the
annual.
ordinance is set as an annual salary.
Sure is.
Yes.
I say it's,
So we.
I don't care if there's
It just,
30
or his last payment happens
Annual
to be
salary.
less than the rest, maybe, however that's determined. That's not our problem. We say this particular person makes $34,000. How administration pays that person unless it's spelled out. Because I know we used to spell it out, like monthly, biweekly, et cetera. I don't think we do that anymore, do we?
We have it
Some of them.
annual, hourly is what we have.
Yeah.
And then,
There's
so,
other
so
ones that are
then-
annual.
So for us,
A lot of 'em.
there's the money, however administration pays. I mean, I would suppose they could
If-
pay it one time at the beginning of the year based on the ordinance, but
I don't know. I discovered this the other day. We have 5 people, in fact, that are impacted potentially, and 5 only. And all I've done so far is, once I realized it, is come up with the number of people impacted so that it wouldn't, I was hoping it wasn't 20. I was wishing it'd been 1, not 5.
Well, I don't really know, but doesn't,
actually,
I
we
well, I
have
mean, for
6.
some individuals, I don't, you have to look at their contract if they're
Creation.
part of a collective bargaining agreement, obviously, and then I think.
which wouldn't be included. It wouldn't be here.
But, I
We're
mean,
mostly
my
hourly.
follow-up
Most of
question
those
with the
people
law
are hourly.
director, I mean, don't we have, I mean, do we have a fee agreement with the firm?
Technically, a
An employee.
part-time
Yeah.
employee. He has basically a contract.
Okay,
Oh,
but we
I
don't
was-
pay the firm at all?
We pay,
say
yes, I mean, that's in essence what.
Because typically what most governments do, they pay the firm this much, and then the appointed law director gets like that much.
Correct.
Kinda
But
like
in
that.
this case, he is technically an employee.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, no,
He-
I know they're technically employed, but so a lot of law director contracts with municipalities, it'll be like $100,000, let's say, for that law firm, and then $6,000 annually to this individual who's kind of the attorney that shows up at the meetings and things like that, and they get an amount of OPERS that corresponds to that. Is that our agreement with Ennis, Roberts, and Fisher?
Yes,
What?
because we do pay into Oprah's for him.
Okay, for a smaller amount than we pay the actual firm.
We don't pay the
No.
firm.
We don't pay the firm at all.
No.
No, we pay, the firm becomes, like you said, we have a law director, and then we also pay them basically not a stipend, what am I thinking?
Retainer?
Yeah, basically, for services. And which-
Okay.
Yeah, which we have agreed to.
So this 35,564, that's like Bill's salary.
Correct.
Okay, cool. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's like.
And so is any of
salary
this
plus a
money-
s-
Well,
an
that's
extra
not
payroll.
a salary. That's,
See, that's the question is,
It is
we
his
pay him.
salary.
He's not an hourly
Number
employee.
is not what it should be.
no, but remember, Mr. President, that the
Well, I
budget
mean,
numbers and
not an hourly
appropriation,
Right.
that does not determine his salary. This number does not determine his salary.
100%.
No, that number does.
Correct. But just,
That's what I was saying.
okay,
Yeah.
just so that we're clear that this number does not determine a person's salary. This is the maximum amount that can be paid for whatever reason.
Mr. President, so I just want to make sure I understand what's happening here. You're basically paying him extra or more than?
No.
They can't.
No.
So let me
say
explain
that.
it. So we have a person that gets paid a biweekly pay of, say, $1,000, okay?
I understand all of that.
So last year, he would have been paid $26,000.
I understand that.
Next year, he'll be paid $27,000 because there's an extra payroll. So
No, that I don't understand. If his salary is $26,000 a year, then each paycheck is less because it's not by paycheck, it's by year. So you divide the year by the 27 instead of the 26, right?
if somebody wants to, I have not looked at his contract. I need to look, somebody needs to look at his contract.
It's not, we set that annually. I'm looking at the staffing ordinance, and it's actually the city administrator, the law director, finance director, police chief, scrolling down, court clerk, and recreation director. So that's 6 employees that would be affected by it. And I think maybe the 7th was the last, did we?
I think we're also talking potentially like the mayor's court clerk.
That's 7, right?
And I don't know, I came up with one other person.
It's the recreation
So-
director.
So the issue, and of course it came up on the law, and that's where I found it the other day. I was looking at the law director, and it just popped up, and it's like, oh man. But I do not have the answer. I mean, we need to resolve it.
It seems to me like we have the answer. His salary is this, and it
It's
just
annual
needs to
salary.
be divided by 27 instead of 26 if there's an additional pay period. I just don't see how we can pay him and the other 5 people she mentioned an additional amount of money because there's an extra pay period. If your salary, if there's 12 months in a year, your salary is $12,000, but there's an extra pay period,
need to
your salary
understand-
doesn't
That's essentially giving
increase.
them a raise that
Understand the
council didn't
definition of
approve.
salary, because the definition of salary is different in many different ways when you go to paying people. Until I read it and understand the definition of salary, it's not a solved subject. It can be 26 or 27. Before I take the activity of going in and reducing people's payrolls from what they were last year, I need to understand and make an agreement and reach a solve for it.
But you're
Right
not
now, I haven't.
reducing anything. If the yearly salary is this number, this 33,619, you're not reducing anything at all. What you're doing is you're dividing it by a different number. You're not giving him less money.
Mr.
Then
President.
I'll lay out just one more cause for you. Okay, is it impacted by the fact that we're actually only paying him early this year because that pay is supposed to be paid January 1 of 2021. That's a little side impact on it. We're paying it a day early, which is why there's 27 pay periods in 2020. I got another little twist on that one. I haven't figured that one out either.
Okay, well, if it comes out of the 2020 budget, then,
This is the top result.
oh, I'm sorry. Google, thinking that we're talking to Google.
Spies.
They're always listening.
We can talk about this one for a long time, but I'm not satisfied with the answer either way right now, and I'm going to find out. But it's got to be sorted out.
Okay.
We've already been paying people based on one way this year, and
Based on the ordinance that we set. That's how we've been paying people.
Mr. Mosby, you had something?
it's for this year's pay.
Yes. Clearly, when a person gets paid, they are paid for the hours that they have previously worked. So I don't remember what the first paycheck was for January. However, it would have been pay for work that they did in 2019. It would have covered that portion. Now, we do operate on a cash basis, as Mr. Cropper said. So technically, even though they worked the hours in 2019, they were actually paid for them in 2020. So when it was budgeted for that, it was budgeted that they would be paid for that. In 2020, we have a unique situation, again, as he just stated. The new year, 2021, occurs on Friday, and that is a holiday. And so because it's a holiday, it would normally be the payday, which means that it would be the 2021 budget. However, since it is a holiday, the employees are paid the day before, which is December the 31st or 2020. So in essence, what would be actually being done is taking 2021 budget, technically, even though that we haven't actually gotten there yet, and pulling that back in order to pay the money for that. But the idea of trying to, in essence, not necessarily reducing the salary, but in effect, what you're doing is you are paying them less per paycheck, in essence, because of this particular situation that we have here that will occur on December the 31st. So you can discuss it, basically all you like, but honestly, it is money that would be due to each of the employees, whoever those particular employees are, and I think he said that there were 5 of them. And so we just need to allocate or account for that and recognize that it's a unique situation that will happen on December the 31st of this year.
Mr. President?
Mr. President.
Mr. O'Shea?
Realizing that these numbers obviously are part of the consideration of the budget, but also recognizing that the budget, as was mentioned earlier, is fluid, et cetera, changes and all that. I don't know if it's appropriate at this point to discuss how someone's salary gets paid, et cetera. It's a matter of moving forward with being able to approve the budget as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Well,
So,
Mr. President, I'll go after Ms. Bailey.
just real quick, what was the number that you said earlier, Ms. Bailey, that was in the ordinance?
33,619.
Thank you. Ms. Underwood?
What?
Oh, did you?
You asked me, yeah. So
You answered my question.
we're gonna do it. We'll get a jump on this, and then what we'll do is our next finance meeting, we'll go ahead and just do the pay ordinance early instead of at the end of the year. So
Mr. President.
we'll do 2020s.
There's an idea.
Ms. Underwood?
Whoa.
I'm not going to keep beating this to death, I promise. So do we know how many pay periods there are in 2021? And if there are in fact 26 pay periods, as there are in most years, then we all can agree that we're paying all of these employees a larger salary in 2020 than every other year.
Definition of salary.
Salary is a yearly income.
That is not the definition of salary, depending on which contract you're looking at. It moves all over the place, and
When I worked for the government, that was the definition of my salary. It was like, this is what you make a year. And some
It says
years
annual
that
salary.
the paychecks were more than in other years, because it just depends on how many paychecks there are in the year. But at the end of the year, when I put all of my check stubs together and added them up, it equaled that salary number was the same. But here, it's not going to be. And if we're okay with that, I mean, that's fine. I just want to make sure we're okay with that.
Mr. Miller Novak.
Okay, just a couple things, and it's just, I completely agree with Mr. O'Shea that, there's a difference between an appropriation and a salary. An appropriation is money that you set aside and budget for something. It doesn't mean you're,
First.
Fine, I agree with Mr. O'Shea.
You never agree with me, so I need that.
Ms. Zorb,
Thank you.
I agree with very much. Very brilliant, what she said. And then Jim reappropriated. So the issue that, why we probably need to move on, we're not going to get this answer today, and I'm sorry. But salaries are a little bit more complex, and some employees are purely at will, and some employees are served completely at our pleasure in one way or another. And then other employees, specifically once you start getting into fire and police, have certain statutory protections that are under the ORC. So the analysis for which employees could be shrunk or not could be different for each employee depending on how the ORC addresses that employee, any engagement letters we have with these people, so on and so forth. So we're just not going to come up with these answers tonight, and it's just not going to happen. So, and I agree with Ms. Bailey too, that is something the Finance Committee should work on, and that's something they should work on with you. And you probably need to talk to Bill Dieters a little bit, because there might be a little bit of legal analysis by looking into the statutes regarding public safety and things like that, and what we can do, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next page, 101.750, Income Tax Department.
That's
You got 7 minutes.
Wow.
TikTok.
Any questions?
Filibuster time. You filibuster me.
So just so you know,
You have a comment, Mr. Crawford?
I do, I'm sorry, I didn't ask. The $82,500 should be $91,000.
Which one?
The $82,500 for Rita.
Professional
should
services
be
for Rita.
$91,000. That has to go up, I'm sorry.
That has to.
Yes.
Doesn't that
it has
adjust
to increase.
everything then?
We received a bill, or
Professional
are going to
services
receive a
for
bill
Rita.
for the
This.
subpoenas that they sent out.
Okay.
And what is
Yeah.
it again?
91.
91,000 even.
91?
So
Right, because they charge us per subpoena, right?
$8.
And then there's a separate charge for like each civil filing in municipal
Correct.
court to collect on any
Correct, but they're
delinquents.
pretty minimal. That
Yeah, do they
simple
take a
filing is really
percentage
low.
of the garnishments or something like that? Is that how we pay them for the garnishments? Do you know?
I'm not,
We pay them, Mr. Miller Novak, we pay them a retainer for the beginning of the year. And then, in
the night anyways.
actually, the annual fee that we pay is based on, in the aggregate, the monies that they collect, not just from us, but from everybody.
Okay.
And so then what they do is they take that, divide it out, and then determine what the percentage is. So last year, for example, they take a standard 3%. And then, but they figured out last year, I think the standard fee was 1-point-something%. So we ended up getting a rebate back from them.
Okay.
fairly large one, yes.
That's it. Thanks. Thanks for explaining that.
Okay, any questions?
I imagine that the overall numbers are going to be changed to reflect what we just did by the time we pass it, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about the 8,000?
Well, the 82, the 91,
Yes,
I mean,
right,
that just
that
changes
will-
the overall.
right. We just received that information. What
Okay.
was it today, Mr. Crawford?
Yes,
Right.
literally today.
It's like our balance just shrunk.
But we made up a few dollars on the one position and under the
He giveth, he taketh away.
701 fund too.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Next page is 101.799, general government and miscellaneous.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Shea.
I need an explanation for a lot of those transfers and reimbursements in there. I'm not sure I understand the 44,000 transfer out to 402 from the city center fund.
Okay, that one's easy. We set up a fund for the debt to fix this roof, and we have no way of paying it except for transferring money to it, because there's no revenue source to that fund. I'm not certain why we set up a special fund for that.
So that way we could track the interest rate at the time and the bond. And we did it very intentionally that it would be a money in, money out situation, so that way it was very transparent on what we were paying overall to have the roof done.
So it's in a separate fund.
So,
Putting that in building and zoning?
for a,
I'm sorry.
no,
It's being moved to building and zoning? Do I read that right? 402?
Listen. I'm missing you on the 40.
What, it says transfer out to 402, correct? Yes. And it,
Which page are you on?
well, yeah, I'm finishing up the miscellaneous area.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were already moved into the other funds. So we're looking at 799, okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yes, so transfer out to the 402 City Center Fund, yes, the
And that-
44,000.
And 402, is that building and zoning, or am I confused on the way that's?
402 actually is the City Center Improvement Fund.
Where is that? So that's not a
It says it.
101.402?
It's a separate fund, 402.
Oh,
It's the second to last page.
ah,
It's on the front of the last
Not
page.
101, 402, just for, see?
That's the front of
That's
the
why
last
you ask
page.
questions.
that's what, exactly. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then the, I guess the reimbursement, I think we may have talked about this a little bit, the reimbursement to the general fund 201, that's 60,000.
So that's the conversation we had about taking the money out of moving the expense for the EMTs over to the fire equipment fund. Thank you.
Is that all, Mr. O'Shea?
The next two reimbursements, I guess, was probably going to be a similar answer, but the moving into 211 and 401, and that's kind of the same reasoning? Is that?
So those street funds, there's a lot of activity from the people getting paid by the general fund, administration, and finance. You know, we do a lot of work in tracking, and that's an allocation of our time and expenditures. Well, I'm sorry, expenditures based on our time,
Yeah.
duh.
But again, that goes back to the allocating
Right.
time and trying to move some money around.
Correct. And again, though, I mean, that is a not only accepted practice by the auditor's office, but they actually recommend you allocate your expenses where they hit. So,
It's 2,100 hours.
Any other questions? All right, are we finished?
What does that mean?
Like always or tonight?
Actually, I have one for, I guess, the snapshot
Okay.
for the,
Snapshot in the middle.
I guess it's, well, on mine, it was the very last page after that, general fund, maybe, because there's a street fund.
Yeah, why is another snapshot in the middle?
Okay, so,
Are you on the page that says snapshot and then starts at 201 streets?
yes.
Okay.
That's the,
So this is kind of a twofold question. I see that, and I know that we can do a cleanup ordinance, okay? So let's just go ahead and say that I know that, and we don't have to explain cleaning up, okay? But based on the information that we got at the last meeting, it said that our fire levy basically closed out at a negative amount. I don't think that's legal, but I don't know, so that's why I'm asking.
So you can a fund can close at a negative balance. You have to have a plan in place to get it back. Now, the plan can be merely an allocation of dollars from the general fund. It can finish negative.
Do we have that plan from 2019?
Oh, for 2019?
Yeah, because the one that we just got said that ended at negative 21,000, I think.
At the end of 19?
the
Yeah.
fire or the police?
So the plan
Fire levy.
the plan that we're doing right now is the plan to fix that.
Okay,
None of these funds at the end of what we're doing here are going to be projected as negative. Unless we reallocate dollars that make something negative, and then we're going to have to fix it.
but,
We can't pass,
Well,
when we send these funds, just so you know, so when we send these funds to the county, it all gets fed into a little grid sheet that they have, and if anything comes back negative, they won't approve it. It just flat rejects.
okay.
So having said that, it looks like here, it's, maybe that's where the 301, the police levy, shows a negative right now, and that's,
And that's, yeah, but what is this one? It does show, it definitely does show a negative. but
yeah,
then
$20,000 negative.
on,
That is correct.
this one shows almost the same number, $20,223 negative for fire at the fund balance end of last year for this page that's like a special like addendum page. So maybe that was just,
So what is that? Oh, was that an earlier dated one?
this one is, well, we got it the same day that we got this budget, and it was the day that we talked about the Rumkey contract. So basically, it says that our fire levy fund ended in 2019 at negative $20,223.
Just so you know, you see, there's a little magic to some of these dates on here, and I hate to say it that way, but I closed the books of 2019 in the middle of February. So the final allocations and the final expenses, and I will say allocations because the fire and police levy, there were some dollars that were moved there based on how they were originally expensed. The problem with the fire and police levy was the revenues were substantially off for the year. So even though we came in under on the budget expenses in both cases, we didn't have the funds in place to actually balance at year end. So we have to fix it this year. And the only one that actually ended up coming in negative is I look at year-to-date actual on this sheet. I didn't put totals. That's lovely. If you look, okay, the calculation, though, the correct calculation is the revised 2020 sheet, that top number. So in the case of, the police levy, we ended the year with a $20,000 deficit in that fund. Because we finished 18 with a $400 balance. We actually came in expenditure-wise under our expenses, but our budget you see, we budgeted 602,000 in the police levy for 19. We only spent 591, but we budgeted 614,000 in revenues, and we had a big miss because we planned our receipts at full value in all of our real estate tax categories. We didn't budget for any delinquencies or any non-collections, and I think there was like a $20,000 or $25,000 shortage in the police levy because of delinquencies. Possibly we'll collect some of that this next year.
So, just so I'm reading this right, though, in that case, so in 2019, the actual revenue was $570,000, and we're not going to go into the other. The expenses were $591,000. However, we're still budgeting $611,256, knowing that we only got $570,000 last year.
Yeah, so if we look at, let's flip over, what is that? That's 301. Let's go to the detail of what we're looking at there.
And that's starting in a $20,000 deficit.
So if you look at the sorry for a minute. I've got to look at the 301 budget for just a second. Okay. So the difference, got two things going on there. If you look at, do you look at the full detail page on the 301 police levy fund?
The real tiny print.
Yeah, it's very small print. Thank you. I got my glasses on. If you look at the difference there, if you look at it says police levy reimbursement. What that actually is the billing to the school district for the school resource office. The billing did not go out in the third quarter. So we're going to, instead of having, we basically had 2 payments rather than 3 for the year of 19, and we're going to have 4 in 20 because the billing did not go out at the end of the year. Frankly, I didn't know that we were supposed to bill. So they have been billed since. There will be 4 payments this year.
And so how
That's
about...
a $35,000 difference.
Okay, so how about, though, the exact same question for fire and EMS levy? We have revenues projected at 351, but revised at 359, knowing that our expenses this year were 410,000.
Knowing that our what now?
I'm sorry. The right below it, fire EMS levy. So the school resource officer, I'm not saying I'll buy that as like being sarcastic, but I'll buy that. Like that'll, okay.
That's fine, yeah.
So nobody reimburses us for school fire officers, do they? And if not, can we get on that program?
So if you go to the 302, we're talking about the 302 fund, right? So if you look at what we received, look at year-to-date actual, we received $303,000 on the actual general property tax, down from $314,000 in the previous year. I do believe we're not going to have those kind of delinquencies again. I'm budgeting $310,000. I'm budgeting continuing collections of delinquents from the past years, and I'm budgeting exactly what we've gotten on utility. The actual, if I remember right, the actual number that we're due for property tax, which, I mean, the number's already out there, in that fund is $330,000. that tells me I'm going to have $20,000 in delinquencies at that level. I'm not certain why we have such high delinquencies in our property taxes, and they will get collected eventually. They are real estate taxes. They become levies, or I'm sorry, become liens on the property.
Hold on, I'm trying to find fire.
Fire, it's in this deck.
It's just the next page now. From that little tiny print, it's the next page.
Not quite so tiny print, right? But again, the real estate tax number for that levy, it's like $332,000. We'll have a continuous flow of dollars from the past, but I mean, I can't imagine that we're going to be that low again. 302,000, have a 10% delinquency on our real estate taxes. Even at the numbers I've got, that's a 7% delinquency.
Are there any other questions?
I actually, I guess it's more of a comment than a question. To me, it seemed like the only thing that seems really outstanding here is that there was the issue with the fire department equipment fund, and there was some tension between how it's currently set up and some past ordinance that limited how those funds can be spent. So at some point, I mean, one of two things, I mean, what I got out of that was one of two things have to happen. Either that ordinance needs to be dealt with or this budget needs to be dealt with to deal with that. And that's a decision that has to be made by this council. It's not going to be made tonight, but it has to be made before this budget's done.
Correct.
Now, with that being said, we did handle that in public safety once before, but if you guys want to handle it in finance, I will bring out all of the old ordinances and even the ordinances that it mentions from 2007 and on and so forth if I can find them all, but.
All the old ones don't really matter. The only one that matters is the latest one that I thought you had a copy of right there. Is that true? I thought you had pulled it up.
I have it on right here.
And it says it can't be used that way. Is that true?
Yeah.
So if you could just maybe tell Mr. Cropper what that number is, he can look it up and maybe adjust the budget accordingly and then send that to us and we'll make decisions.
Can I ask a different question? Mm-hmm. So where's the resolution that tells me I have to put all the EMS run money out? Why does the general fund have to shift all that money to this fund? There's a resolution somewhere that tells, because the money doesn't belong to this fund, it belongs to the general fund unless there's a resolution that says otherwise. That's the resolution that we need to be dealing with.
I believe that there is, and let's see here.
100% of those dollars going to that fund is not supportable. The general fund can't support that. And that's what I'm talking to. Now, the way that I talked about it is just do an allocation back for the cost of the firefighters. Well, that's putting it over and then bringing it back. Don't even worry about it. Just figure out why, how do we allocate a smaller amount of the EMS run dollars to that fund, and then use the fund properly after that. That we don't have to get clever about how we figure out how to take money away from it. We just put the right amount in it.
Or what if we look at taking it and expanding it to include capital outlay, like for the building and the roof and turnout gear and all of that, and using it to do that and still keeping it a protected fund so that way they can still have better stuff over there at the fire department.
That's fine, but right now. Agreed,
That was the
agreed.
point.
And the thing about it is we can use those, we can do things like that. As we build out and get a true economic growth of some sort happening so that we can get our revenue base growing, then we can, heaven forbid, we can even take out some debt to do some of those things if we got resources coming in to pay it back. But the current need is to get through 2020. And I would say the current need is to get through 2020 to survive the 27th payroll. But next year, the built-in 4% raise for salaries next year by union contracts is going to be a little more than the 27th payroll. So budgets are going to be flat year over year next year also. So if we don't get growth in revenue, it doesn't really matter what we do. We just got a small amount of funds to deal with.
Participation.
What's that?
That's,
Question?
no.
Okay.
All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn? I would like a motion to adjourn. I'm not saying that to say I want to be done. I just,
Right. Well, Mr. President.
I would like to have a motion.
I just, if
Ms.
there's a
Underwood.
citizen who sat through this brutality, I mean, I feel like if she has a question,
Sorry.
can we just?
That is a
can we-
great point.
Can we answer her question? She is a constituent. We work for her. I would like to, and if we can't directly answer her question, then I will ask her question through her. She can ask her question through
I'm
me.
sorry. Do we have public participation? I apologize. Thank you. My apologies, Ms. O'Shea. Is that what you were saying?
It hasn't been brutal. It's been enlightening, kind of frustrating. Wanted to pull my hair out several times, but I'm listening to the budget, and as a citizen of this city for 25 years, I figured it out.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Can you tell us?
Shauna O'Shea, 1916 Acorn Drive.
I'm sure.
No,
they all know
you're
that.
fine.
I didn't.
Is there not a way to go to the employees of this city and to ask them not to take their raises this year for the betterment of our city, and to say to them, we're going under? And if there is a way that we cannot take, and I'm going across the board, I'm talking firemen, public works, police officers, how much ammunition does this city need? I mean, every year, even when I was on council, we've allotted $4,000 for ammunition. And in 25 years, I have not seen an uprising in this city that we need $4,000 of ammunition in 25 years. I know as a personal, because I was on the fire department for 12 years, I have bought my own pants when I was on the fire department. And not T-shirts, because they're T-shirts of North College Hill. But I used to buy my own fire pants, not bunker gear, but fire pants. And I know to this day, because I do have a son that's on the fire department, but I know a lot of the firemen wear their pants from other departments. Can some of the police officers not use that money and maybe buy their own pants? I don't know if that's feasible, but I meant, can we reuse pens and not have $4,000 of, I don't know if that's the allotted amount, but can we sacrifice as a city and save some of that money instead of using office supplies of $5,000? And I'm throwing numbers out there. I don't know these numbers as a fact. So please do not take that as a fact of the numbers I'm throwing out. But as a city, can we save some of this money and not spend it on this kind of money and save it for the betterment of our city? Can we ask our city to save money and not take raises this year, maybe? I'm just asking that as a city to to do that. I'm just frustrated as a citizen. And herein, I was out there for the police levy, working to get this police levy, and to hear of that the police levy this year, or the fire levy, sorry, not the police levy, but the fire levy is at 0. And here we work so hard to get this fire levy, but yet we're unsustainable. The fire department is unsustainable, but we've worked so hard to get a fire department that sustainable, and yet we're at a 0 in our fire department levy, a levy for our fire department, and we're at 0. I meant, dear God, I want somebody to be at my house when my house is on fire, or when I have a 3-year-old grandbaby that's choking to death or possibly bleeding. I want someone to be there, but yet I passed a fire levy and it's at 0? I mean, every one of us that is sitting in this room, besides Mr. Cropper, but every one of us is sitting in this room lives here. And we have a fire department that's unsustainable. I'm just floored. So, we need to do something. And if that is asking our employees to not take a 4% raise, every one of us should want better for this city, even our employees. So I don't know, Mr. Mosby, if this could be something that we take to our employees and ask them if they're willing to next year not take that. And I don't know how much that will save.
Shauna, some of that, I don't mean to cut you off, but some of that's a lot easier to answer than other things. When it comes to asking employees to not take a raise, it's a public entity. We've got public bargaining units. That's what gets negotiated in a contract every 2 years. We can't go back and say, hey, that raise that we've contractually negotiated with you that was going to be incremental over 3 years, well, give it back. It's just not going to work like that. And I'm not quite done yet. And then, the other issue, with the levy, that's certainly frustrating for me. I supported the last levy we threw out there, and it didn't happen. And unfortunately, I wasn't on council during the last levy, and regardless of any of our differences up here, but when you're putting out a levy, it's a weird balancing act where if you ask for too much, it'll fail, and then sometimes you hedge it, and then you don't ask for enough, and the world's going to inflate, and you asked for that much when you should have asked for that much, and so that levy wasn't enough, and then you have to go back to people again, and I think that was part of the problem when that levy was last passed.
Agreed.
You probably didn't ask for enough.
Agreed.
And it didn't account for inflation, and then we had to ask people for more money, and they were pretty peeved off. And I don't know if you saw the signs or got on the Facebook.
Yes. But
it bombed pretty significantly, and people were pretty angry. So our next task is going to have to be to address the shortcoming of the last levy and to try to find that balance between maybe the overshooting of the subsequent one. So that's something that has to be dealt with, and that's something we've already talked about in public safety and are going to deal with. But the salary thing, it's a collective bargaining unit, and that's also a balancing act, because when you're in a collective bargaining negotiation, everything's on the table. Those pants you're talking about, and that's why I didn't want to throw 4% down, because if you say we're going to give you 4%, you're taking that bargaining chip off the table, because when you're negotiating with employees, some were like, well, maybe I'll take 3% raise if I can get 5 pairs of socks and then 2 days off for the holidays and this. All those conditions of employment are things that you negotiate, and that's something we have to do and the collective bargaining thing, we can't really talk about that
No,
with
I
you
agree.
right now, because then we weaken our collective bargaining negotiation power, and that's what they need. So we can't throw out our intentions or beliefs or desires. Not that I don't want to talk, but it would be really foolish for us to do that.
I agree. But it doesn't hurt for everyone to know, police, fire, and public works, and maybe they don't know, that we're bleeding.
I think they do know.
I don't know if they know.
My wife taught for years. She knew when her school was hurting for money and they had to go for a levy. There's not a public employee in the world that doesn't realize that their government entity is swimming in some debt or whatever the case might be. Not that that's really our problem, but they know, and a lot. No, I've seen teachers take pay freezes or reductions, and those are things that happen behind closed doors in collective bargaining negotiations all the time, and they will happen. And I trust that when Ron negotiates our agreements with Mr. Dieters, that's what they're going to talk about, and that's part of the horse trading system of a collective bargaining negotiation.
Well, thank you for listening to me. It's just hard to sit out here and hear it. So, thank you.
I would love to have a $20 million budget. It's hard to sit up here and hear it sometimes, and it's tense and it's hard. And this is one of the worst times being a council member for me, is when you got to talk about the budget. It's very hard.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Ms. O'Shea, I would like to apologize again for not recognizing you. I actually wrote your name at the beginning as an audience participant, but thank you.
And I accidentally said on the record the other day I didn't want to talk to you, and it wasn't intended that way. Jim can explain that later.
Quickly, just may I ask a question? So I will make these handful of changes that we agreed to, run those back out to everybody, like instantly. Next step. And I'm saying next step because time is very short. We do have to have, I need to forward something to the county no later, in proper format, no later than in the close of business March 30th.
March 30th?
Yeah, they'll process it on the 31st, and we'll have an
Okay.
approved budget on the 31st.
Okay.
But it has to be there on the close of business 30th.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
Mr. Cropper, I believe you have time off coming. When is your last?
I leave next Friday. I am gone next Friday
that date?
for, that is the 6th, I believe, and I get back on the 25th.
Oh, so you'll be back
I will be
before it's
back.
due.
Yes.
That's what I
Provided
need
they
to
let
know.
me out of.
Thank you.
Or
That's
let
where I'm
you
going.
in, right.
Yeah, a lot can change between now and then, sir.
Quarantine somewhere.
Yeah.
Mr.
The more
President?
critical question is, there's only 2 council meetings between, and his 3 weeks is, that's his 3 weeks, but there's only 2 council meetings, next Monday and then the 3rd Monday of the month. So it has to be done by then.
Mr. O'Shea?
In response to Mrs. O'Shea and Mr. Milanovac's statements there, I think it's understood that because of the collective bargaining agreement, we're required to make those payments, but it also comes down to, as Mr. Cropper said, to some degree, if there's not enough revenue to cover the expenses, then we have to do something. And it could come down very well to layoffs. So then the question then would be, would you rather lose a person or all of the people lose 2% of their raise? So I think it's definitely something that could come out there that could be discussed. Obviously, a memorandum of understanding or some other amendment to the collective bargaining agreement can be talked about and agreed upon if necessary. But it's definitely not out of the question. It always comes down to who takes the hit. So.
I'm sure that'll be talked about behind those closed doors. I motion we adjourn.
All right, Mr. Miller-Novak. Motion to adjourn. Second by Ms. Zorb. Ms. Bailey?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Hedger?
Yes.
Ms. Underwood?
Yes.
Mr. Miller-Novak?
Yes.
Ms. Zorb?
Yes.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
And Mr. O'Shea.
Yeah, but I feel compelled to
Yes, but
just make sure that it's understood that I'm not sure that that's really appropriate during a committee meeting. And though I would agree that it's time to adjourn, the vote to adjourn and all that would seem,
Just hit the gavel, let's go.
All right, yeah.
just saying.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.